If you can't function like a normal adult, go live in the streets, my sister screamed across the Christmas roast. Her face twisted in disgust. My parents said nothing, only warning me not to ruin the mood. I quietly folded my napkin and walked out into the freezing night. She told me to live on the street, completely unaware that I made over $40 million a year and effectively owned half this town. My name is Joanna Ortiz, and for the last 10 years, my family has been convinced I am a spectacular failure. To the residents of Maple Falls, Ohio, I am the prodigal daughter who never quite launched, the 34-year-old woman who drifts between cities with no husband, no children, and, according to my mother, no real career. I drove into town under the cover of a slate-gray winter sky, my tires crunching over the salted asphalt of the driveway I grew up on. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I left at 18. It was a sturdy, middle-class colonial with peeling white paint and a wreath on the door that had seen better decades. It was the kind of house that demanded gratitude from its occupants, a physical reminder of my father's 40 years at the auto plant and my mother's penny-pinching budgeting. I parked my rental car, a modest sedan I had picked up at the airport specifically for this charade, behind my sister's gleaming white Range Rover. The license plate on her SUV read, Skindar, a vanity plate for the family's golden child. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself against the cold and the inevitable emotional assault waiting inside. I told myself this would be the last time. I had been telling myself that for 5 years. Inside, the house was suffocatingly warm and smelled of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the cloying scent of cinnamon candles my mother bought in bulk. Bing Crosby was crooning about a white Christmas from the vintage record player in the corner, a touch intended to create an atmosphere of timeless tradition. My Aunt Elise and Uncle Robert were there, nursing glasses of eggnog, their faces flushed with heat and alcohol, but beneath the laughter and the clinking of silverware, there was a tension that hummed like a high-voltage wire. We were seated at the dining table, the good china laid out on a lace tablecloth that felt rough against my wrists. I sat across from my younger sister, Ivy, at 31. Ivy was the undisputed star of the Ortiz lineage. She was a dermatologist and the owner of Serene Ivy Clinic, a medical spa that had opened 2 years ago and quickly became the go-to spot for the aging socialites of Maple Falls. She sat with her posture perfect, her hair a glossy curtain of chemically straightened perfection, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than the sedan I had parked outside. The conversation, as it always did, gravitated toward Ivy's success. "I just don't know how you do it, sweetheart," my mother gushed, spooning mashed potatoes onto Ivy's plate. "Dr. Evans was telling me at the grocery store that you have the magic touch with Botox. He said you are single-handedly raising property values in town by making everyone look so young." Ivy preened, taking a delicate sip of wine. "It is exhausting. Mom, being a business owner is not for the faint of heart. I have 15 employees now. Managing payroll alone is a nightmare, but someone has to provide quality care to this community." "You are a pillar of Maple Falls," my father declared, raising his glass. "A doctor, a business owner. You make us proud. Ivy, real work, tangible work." I kept my eyes on my peas, pushing them around the porcelain with my fork. I knew what was coming. The praise for Ivy was always the prelude to the dissection of Joanna. "And Joanna," my mother said, her voice shifting from adoring to pitying in a single breath, "how are things out there? Are you still doing that computer thing?" "I am fine, Mom," I said quietly. "Work is going well." "Work," Ivy scoffed, the word dripping with skepticism. She set her wineglass down a little too hard. "Joanna, let us be honest. It is not really work, is it? You are always on your laptop. You are always traveling. But you never say who you are meeting. It is all just online. The digital economy is real. Ivy," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It is unstable is what it is," my father interjected, pointing his fork at me. "Look at you, Joanna, 34 years old. You rent an apartment in Chicago. You drive rental cars. You have no assets. No brick and mortar. Ivy built a clinic from the ground up. You? You are floating. When are you going to put down roots? When are you going to get a real job with benefits and a pension? I have benefits, I said. I have a very robust portfolio. My Aunt Elise chimed in then. Her voice slurred. My neighbor's son makes money playing video games. Is that what you do, Joe? Is that why you are never home? Playing games? Laughter rippled around the table. It was not good-natured. It was the sharp, jagged laughter of people who needed someone to look down on to feel better about their own mediocrity. I do not play games, I said, my grip tightening on my silverware. I build systems. I consult. Consult, Ivy laughed, a harsh, barking sound that cut through the Christmas music. That is just a fancy word for unemployed. Joanna, face it, you are barely scraping by. Mom and Dad are too nice to say it. But we all know you are one bad month away from moving back into your old bedroom. It is embarrassing. I have patients asking about my sister, and I have to invent stories because the truth is too pathetic. You are 34, and you have nothing to show for your life. I felt the heat rise up my neck. It was not anger at the lie. It was anger at the sheer blindness of it. For a decade, I had protected them from the scale of my world, terrified that if they knew the truth, our relationship would become transactional. I wanted them to love me for me, not for what I could buy them. But I realized in that moment, looking at their sneering faces, that they did not love me at all. They loved the hierarchy, and they loved that I was at the bottom of it. I am not scraping by, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. I live a very comfortable life. I do not need your pity, and I certainly do not need your judgment. Ivy's eyes narrowed. She did not like being contradicted. She was the doctor. She was the success story. I was the prop. Comfortable? Ivy shouted, suddenly slamming her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. You call driving a rental car comfortable? You call showing up here once a year with cheap gifts comfortable? Stop lying to yourself. You are a loser. Joanna, you are a burden on our minds. Ivy, calm down, my father said, but he was looking at me, not her. His eyes said, fix this. You are upsetting your sister. No, I will not calm down. Ivy stood up, her face flushed red, a vein throbbing in her neck. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my face. I work 12 hours a day. I save lives. Well, skin, but it matters. You do nothing. You contribute nothing. If you cannot function like a normal adult, go live in the streets, because that is where you belong. The silence that followed was absolute. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. My aunt looked down at her plate. My mother gasped, but she did not reach out to me. She reached out to Ivy, soothingly touching her arm. Ivy, honey, your blood pressure, Mom whispered. Then she looked at me, her eyes hard. Joanna, look what you have done. You know how stressed your sister is. Why do you have to provoke her? It is Christmas. Do not ruin the mood. I looked from my mother to my father. He was cutting his turkey, refusing to meet my gaze. He was choosing his side, just as he had every day of my life. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply placed my napkin next to my plate, aligning the edges perfectly. Thank you for the meal, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. I think I have overstayed my welcome. Sit down. Joanna, my father commanded. Do not be dramatic. I am not being dramatic, I said, standing up. I am doing exactly what Ivy suggested. I am leaving. I walked out of the dining room, past the tree with its blinking lights, past the framed photos on the mantel that showed a dozen pictures of Ivy and only one of me, a blurry graduation photo from high school. I grabbed my coat from the rack. If you walk out that door, my mother called out from the dining room, her voice shrill, do not expect us to come running after you. I would never expect that, I murmured to the empty hallway. I opened the front door and stepped out into the biting Ohio winter. The wind hit my face like a slap, freezing the moisture in my eyes. I walked to the rental car, my boots crunching on the snow. My family thought I was destitute. They thought I was a drifter. They thought I was nothing. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and unlocked the screen. The dashboard for my company, NovaFlux Systems, was the first thing to greet me. The year-to-date revenue ticker was glowing in green, $42,600,000. I was the CEO and founder of the leading supply chain automation firm in the Midwest. I had just closed a deal with a logistics giant in Germany that would net me another $8 million in personal equity by the second quarter. I did not just have a job, I was an industry titan. And as for their precious town, I looked down the hill toward the twinkling lights of the main street. My holding company, Lawson Harbor Holdings, had spent the last 3 years quietly acquiring commercial real estate in Maple Falls. I owned the strip mall where my father bought his hardware. I owned the building that housed the bank where they kept their meager savings. I looked back at the house, the windows glowing with a warm, deceptive light. You tell me to go live in the streets, Ivy. I thought, a cold smile touching my lips as I opened the car door. If you knew that half the streets in this town are practically my driveway, would you still have the courage to scream at me? I started the engine and backed out, leaving the driveway and the family I was finally done with behind me in the dark. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of gray highway and biting wind, but the moment I slipped behind the wheel of my black Tesla Model S Plaid, the silence was my sanctuary. I had left the rental sedan, that prop of mediocrity, at the agency near the Ohio border and reclaimed my own life. As the skyline of Chicago rose up from the horizon, glittering like a jagged crown of electric ice against the black lake, I felt the physical weight of Maple Falls lifting off my shoulders. This was my city. This was where I was not merely existing, but conquering. I pulled into the private underground garage of my building in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The valet nodded respectfully, a stark contrast to the dismissal I had faced hours earlier. "Good evening, Ms. Ortiz. Welcome home." "Thank you, Henry," I said, handing him the key fob. "It has been a long night." The elevator ride to the penthouse took 40 seconds. When the doors slid open, I stepped onto Italian marble floors heated to a precise 72 degrees. My apartment was a fortress of glass and steel, offering a 360-degree view of the city that slept beneath me. There were no peeling paint strips here, no dusty carpets, no scent of cheap cinnamon and passive aggression. The air smelled of white tea and expensive leather. I tossed my coat onto the sectional sofa and walked straight to the command center I had built in the living room. 3 curved monitors hummed to life. This was the heart of NovaFlux Systems. To my parents, I was someone who did things online, a phrase they uttered with the same disdain one might use for a gambling addiction. To the logistics industry, I was the architect of the modern supply chain. NovaFlux did not just track packages. We used predictive AI to reroute global shipping lanes in real time, anticipating weather patterns, political unrest, and fuel spikes before they happened. We saved Fortune 500 companies hundreds of millions of dollars in waste annually, and for that service, they paid me, an astronomical fortune. I tapped the screen, pulling up the fourth quarter projections. The numbers were staggering. Revenue was up 28% year over year. I had $42 million in personal earnings sitting in varied asset classes, and that was before the end-of-year bonuses were calculated. I was not just rich, I was wealthy in a way that my sister Ivy, with her leased Range Rover and mortgage-heavy clinic, could not even conceptualize. My phone buzzed on the Marble Island. I hesitated before picking it up. It was a text from my cousin Elise. "Just so you know, Aunt Martha is telling people at the church potluck that you asked Dad for gas money before you left. She is saying they are praying for your stability. I thought you should know." I stared at the screen, a dry, bitter laugh escaping my throat. Gas money. I had just authorized a $3 million infrastructure upgrade for our servers in Zurich, and my mother was telling the town I needed $20 to fill a tank. The disparity between my reality and their fiction was so vast, it was almost disorienting. It was a psychological splitting. In Maple Falls, I was Joanna the charity case, the cautionary tale. Here, I was Joanna the Titan. I tossed the phone aside and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I needed to work. Work was the only thing that made sense. The next morning, the duality of my life became even more absurd. I sat at the head of a mahogany conference table in our downtown headquarters, dressed in a structured blazer that cost more than my father's entire wardrobe. Across from me sat Malik Reed, my chief technology officer and one of the few people who knew the sheer scale of what we were building. The beta tests for the Singapore integration are flawless, Joanna, Malik said, sliding a tablet across the table. We have reduced port congestion latency by 15%. The investors are going to lose their minds. 15% is good, I said, studying the data streams. But let us push for 18. I want to dominate the Asian market by the third quarter, not just participate in it. Get the engineering team to optimize the node transfers. Malik grinned. You are relentless today. Everything okay? Just focused, I said. What is the status on the scholarship fund? Approved this morning, Malik replied. The Joanna Ortiz Women in STEM initiative is fully funded. We are putting 12 girls through engineering programs at MIT and Stanford starting next fall. Full rides, tuition, room, board, and a stipend. I looked at the documents. 12 signatures. 12 lives changed instantly. I was giving these strangers the support I had never received. My parents had refused to co-sign my student loans because they didn't think a computer science degree was ladylike or practical. They had helped Ivy with every tuition payment for med school, claiming it was an investment, while I waited tables to buy used textbooks. Make sure the press release focuses on the students. Malik, I said softly. I do not want my face plastered everywhere. This is about them. You know, most CEOs would want the glory, Malik noted, tilting his head. You operate in the shadows more than anyone I have ever met. Your family. Do they even know you just donated $500,000 to education? I looked out the window at the bustling Chicago street below. My family thinks I am currently unemployed and possibly living out of my car. Malik laughed, assuming I was joking. Right, and I am the King of England. I did not correct him. The truth was too pathetic to explain to a man who respected me. How could I tell him that the woman who commanded a global tech empire turned into a mute, trembling child the moment she crossed the Ohio state line? Later that afternoon, I took a video call with a potential partner in Berlin. I negotiated terms in fluent German, dissecting their logistical framework and pointing out inefficiencies they hadn't even noticed. I wielded power with surgical precision. I was respected. I was feared, in the healthy professional sense. Yet, every time my phone lit up, my stomach clenched. I saw a missed call from my mother, then a voicemail. I didn't listen to it, but I could imagine the content. It would be a guilt trip. Joanna, you upset your sister. Joanna, you need to apologize. Joanna, we are only hard on you because we worry. They didn't worry. They needed me to be the failure so Ivy could be the success. It was a symbiotic toxicity. If I was successful, Ivy wasn't special anymore. If I was rich, my father's meager savings looked pathetic, not noble. My failure was the glue holding their ego together. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of my office. The city was turning on its lights, a sea of amber and white. I could end it all with a single bank statement. I could drive back to Maple Falls, slap a printed portfolio of my assets on the dining table, and watch their world crumble. I could buy the building Ivy's clinic rented space in and evict her. I could buy my parents' mortgage and foreclose. I had the nuclear codes to destroy every narrative they had ever constructed. But I stayed silent. Why? Was it kindness, or was it fear? Maybe I was afraid that even if they knew the truth, they would still find a way to diminish it. They would say I got lucky. They would say I didn't earn it. Or worse, they would suddenly love me. But only for the checkbook. Let them talk, I whispered to the reflection in the glass. My reflection looked back, sharp and impeccably dressed, but the eyes were tired. Elise sent another text. Ivy posted a status saying she is dealing with toxic family members who refuse to grow up. She is getting a lot of sympathy likes. I gripped the phone tight enough to turn my knuckles white. They were not just hurting me. They were capitalizing on my imagined misery. They were building their social currency on the back of my supposed failure. I turned back to my desk, where the glow of the monitors illuminated the room. I had a company to run. I had an empire to build. I had 12 girls to send to college. Let Ivy have her likes on social media. Let my mother have her gossip at the grocery store. Let them enjoy their small, petty kingdom in Maple Falls. I was playing a different game entirely. But as I looked at the city lights, a dark thought curled in the back of my mind like smoke. I was willing to stay silent. Yes, I was willing to let them have their lies. But if they ever tried to cross the line from insults to action, if they ever tried to touch the life I had built from the ashes of their neglect, I would not be the quiet daughter anymore. I was a sleeping dragon, sitting on a hoard of gold they couldn't imagine, and they were poking me with sticks. "Go live in the streets," Ivy had said. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I owned the block. I owned the infrastructure. And one day, they were going to realize that while they were playing house, I had bought the mortgage, for now. I would let the silence hang between us. But silence, as they would eventually learn, is often just the calm before the earthquake. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the disastrous Christmas dinner. When the first crack in the dam appeared, it did not come with a bang or a shout, but with a soft digital ping on the tertiary monitor of my command center. I was in the middle of reviewing the acquisition metrics for a logistics hub in Dubai. My coffee was hot. The Chicago skyline was shrouded in a peaceful morning fog, and my heart rate was resting at a calm 60 beats per minute. I had successfully compartmentalized the memory of Ivy's screaming face and my mother's cold dismissal. I was back in my element, safely insulated by the glass walls of my penthouse and the zeros in my bank account. Then, the email arrived. It landed in my personal inbox, a server I rarely checked because it was mostly filled with spam. Birthday reminders from dental offices, and automated newsletters I had forgotten to unsubscribe from. The subject line caught my eye immediately because of its banality. Action required. Confirmation of loan guarantee renewal. Maple Shore Inn. I frowned. Hovering my mouse over the header, I assumed it was a phishing scam. The Maple Shore Inn was my parents' business. A small, aging bed and breakfast on the edge of the lake that had been losing money for as long as I could remember. I had absolutely nothing to do with its finances. I had never invested a dime in it, nor had I been asked to. Curiosity, however, is a dangerous thing. I clicked open the email. It was from a loan officer named Gary S. Miller at the First National Bank of Ohio. The body of the text was polite, bureaucratic, and terrifying. Dear Ms. Ortiz, we are writing to inform you that the revolving credit facility for the Maple Shore Inn, secured by your personal guarantee and co-signature, is up for its annual review. As the primary guarantor, we require your updated contact information and a signature on the attached renewal disclosure. Please note that the current outstanding balance of $150,000 is in good standing, but interest rates will adjust starting next month. I stared at the screen. The numbers swam before my eyes. $150,000. I had never signed a guarantee. I had never even stepped foot inside that bank. This is a mistake, I said aloud to the empty room. This is a clerical error. My hands were trembling slightly as I downloaded the attachment. It was a PDF, a scanned copy of the original loan agreement dated 3 years ago. I scrolled past the dense legal jargon, the clauses about liability and default, until I reached the final page. There, at the bottom, were 3 signatures. My father's scrawl, shaky and familiar, my mother's neat, looped cursive, and below them, in black ink, was my name, Joanna Marie Ortiz. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. It was a good forgery. A very good forgery. It looked like my signature from high school, the one I used to sign permission slips and report cards. It lacked the sharp, confident slant of the signature I use now to authorize multi-million-dollar mergers. But to a small-town banker who had known my family for decades, it would look authentic enough. The air in the penthouse suddenly felt thin. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. They had not just insulted me. They had not just belittled me. They had stolen my name. They had walked into a bank, looked a loan officer in the eye, and committed a felony to secure cash using my credit history, or at least the credit history they assumed I had. I did not call my parents. I did not call Ivy to scream. That is what the old Joanna would have done. The new Joanna, the CEO of NovaFlux Systems, did not react with emotion. She reacted with strategy. I picked up my phone and dialed a number that was saved under "in case of emergency." Jordan Price, a deep, smooth voice, answered on the first ring. Jordan was one of the most vicious corporate litigators in Chicago, a man who cost me $800 an hour and was worth every penny. "Jordan, I need you to drop whatever you are doing," I said, my voice steady. "I am sending you a document right now. I need you to tell me exactly how much trouble someone is in for forging a federal loan document." There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then Jordan's tone shifted from casual to clinical. "Sending it where? Secure server?" "Yes, check your inbox." I waited, listening to the silence of the line. A minute passed, then 2. "Joanna," Jordan said, and his voice was heavy. "This is a secured business loan document from an FDIC-insured institution. If that is not your signature, we are looking at bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Who signed this?" "My parents," I said, "and probably my sister." Jordan let out a low whistle. "Okay, this complicates things emotionally, but legally, it is cut and dry. They used your name as a guarantor. Essentially, if the business fails, you are on the hook for the $150,000. But why? If they think you are broke, why use you as a guarantor?" "That is what I need to find out," I said. "But Jordan, there is something else. I want to know where the money went. $150,000 is too much for roof repairs on a 10-room inn. I can put a forensic accountant on it, but it will take days to subpoena the bank records without a police report." Jordan said, "No," I cut in. "I have someone faster. Hold on." I conferenced in Malik Reed, my CFO. Malik was a wizard with data trails. At NovaFlux, we tracked supply chains through war zones and natural disasters. Tracking a wire transfer in rural Ohio was child's play for him. "Malik, I am sending you routing numbers from a loan disbursement document," I said without preamble. "I need to know where the liquidity went. The loan was taken out by Maple Shore Inn, but I have a suspicion the capital did not stay there." "On it," Malik said. I could hear the rapid-fire clacking of his mechanical keyboard. "Give me 5 minutes." The wait was agonizing. I paced the length of my living room. I thought about the Christmas dinner. I thought about Ivy's designer clothes, her new equipment at the clinic, her constant bragging about how she built her business from nothing. Real work. My father had called it tangible work. "Got it." Malik's voice came back over the speaker, sounding perplexed. "Okay, this is messy. The loan was disbursed to the Maple Shore Inn business account on February 12th, 3 years ago, but 24 hours later, 90% of the principal, that is $135,000, was transferred out." "Transferred where?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. "It went to a limited liability company called Serene Ivy LLC, Malik said. "And the memo line on the transfer says, consulting fees, Joanna. Serene Ivy LLC is registered to an Ivy Ortiz. Is that a relative?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. It was not for the inn. It was never for the inn. My parents had forged my signature to take out a loan against their own property, risking their home and business, and then funneled the cash directly to Ivy. That was how she started her clinic. That was how she bought her lasers and her renovations. Her entire empire, Her self-made success story was funded by fraud committed in my name. "Joanna?" Jordan's voice was sharp. "Did you hear that?" "I heard it," I whispered. "This changes the landscape," Jordan said, his lawyer brain kicking into overdrive. "This is not just identity theft. This is embezzlement and money laundering within a family structure. They used your credit, likely because you have no debt history that they know of, making you a clean guarantor to leverage the loan, then siphoned the money to your sister. Joanna, if the inn defaults, the bank comes after you. And since you actually have assets, unlike what they believe, the bank could theoretically freeze your personal accounts here in Chicago if this goes sideways." "They stole from me," I said, the realization hardening into cold fury. "They told me to go live in the streets. Jordan, my sister screamed at me that I was a failure. All the while, she was spending money she stole using my name." "What do you want to do?" Jordan asked. "We can file a police report immediately. We can have the sheriff in Maple Falls pick them up by lunchtime. This is a felony. Joanna, prison time." I looked at the signature on the screen again. That shaky J my father had drawn. He had betrayed me for Ivy. Again, always for Ivy. I thought about sending the police. I thought about my mother in handcuffs. As much as I hated them in that moment, the image made my stomach turn. I did not want them in prison. Prison was too easy. Prison made them victims in their own eyes. I wanted them to understand exactly who they had messed with. I wanted to dismantle their lies brick by brick. "No police yet," I said. "Not today." "Joanna, you have to protect yourself," Jordan warned. "If you do not report this as fraud, you are implicitly accepting the debt." "I am not accepting anything," I said, my voice dropping to a register that made Malik go silent on the other end of the line. "Jordan, I want you to contact the bank, inform them that the signature is contested. Initiate a fraud investigation internally with the bank's risk department. That will freeze the credit line immediately. No more drawdowns, no more renewals." "That will trigger a default event for the inn," Jordan noted. "They will demand immediate repayment of the full $150,000. Your parents do not have that kind of cash." "I know," I said. "And since the money is gone, spent on Ivy's clinic, they are going to panic." "You are going to squeeze them," Malik observed, his voice holding a trace of awe. "They touch the one thing I do not allow anyone to touch," I said, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. "My name? They thought my name was worthless, so they used it as a disposable rag to polish Ivy's crown. Now, they are going to find out how heavy that name actually is." "I will draft the letter to the bank immediately," Jordan said. "It will be on the loan officer's desk within the hour. The freeze will be active by close of business today." "Do it," I said. "And Malik, keep watching Serene Ivy, LLC. I want to know every time she buys a latte. If she moves a single cent of that stolen money, I want to know." "You got it, boss," Malik said. I hung up the phone. The silence returned to the penthouse, but it felt different now. It was no longer a sanctuary of peace. It was a war room. I walked back to the window. Far below, the city of Chicago moved with its relentless energy. Somewhere out there in Ohio, in a small town that smelled of dead leaves and stagnant water. My family was waking up, drinking their coffee, thinking they had gotten away with it. Ivy was probably walking into her clinic, looking at the walls paid for by my credit, feeling proud of her independence. They had no idea that the sky was about to fall. "You wanted me to be part of the family," I whispered to the glass. "You wanted my contribution. Well, you have it." I went back to my desk, sat down, and opened a new file. I named it simply, Project Foreclosure. The game had changed. It was no longer about hurt feelings or childhood scars. It was a financial crime, and unfortunately for the Ortiz family, they had just committed it against a woman who hunted discrepancies for a living. I was not going to yell. I was not going to cry. I was going to audit them into oblivion. The forensic accounting report arrived on my screen at 6 a.m, a digital autopsy of my family's betrayal. I sat in my home office with a mug of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. staring at the lines of data that Malik had highlighted in red. "It is exactly as we feared, Joanna," Malik said. He was on the other end of the secure video line, looking unusually somber. "The paper trail is undeniable." I looked at the transaction history for the Maple Shore Inn business account. The loan disbursement from the bank, the $150,000 secured by my forged signature, had hit the account on a Tuesday. By Thursday afternoon, it was gone. It had not gone to a roofing contractor. It had not gone to plumbing repairs or new mattresses for the inn. The funds had been moved in 3 large tranches to an account labeled Serene Ivy Capital Expenditures. "They stripped the inn," I said, my voice flat. "They took a loan out to save the family business, and they gave every single cent to Ivy." "And look at the dates," Malik pointed out. "This aligns perfectly with when your sister expanded her clinic, the new laser suite, the marble reception area she posted all over Instagram. You paid for that, Joanna. Well, your credit rating paid for that." I closed my eyes, a sudden, sharp memory piercing through the anger. 2 years ago, I had come home for Thanksgiving. Ivy had been glowing, practically vibrating with arrogance. She had dragged me into the living room to show me photos of her massive expansion. She bragged that she was a genius at leveraging assets, that banks were throwing money at her because her business plan was so solid. My parents had beamed at her, telling me I should take notes on how to be a real entrepreneur. All that time, they were looking me in the eye, knowing they had stolen my identity to fund her vanity project. "There is more," Jordan's voice cut in. He had joined the call a few minutes prior, listening in silence until now. "Malik found the money, but I found something much worse. I found the reason why they needed your signature specifically." "Because I have good credit?" I asked. "No," Jordan said, "because they do not own the land. Joanna, you do." The silence in the room was so heavy it felt physical. I blinked, trying to process the words. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Mom and Dad have owned the Maple Shore Inn for 30 years. "They owned the business operations," Jordan corrected. "But the land? The actual 10 acres of lakefront property the inn sits on? That belonged to your grandmother, Rose Ortiz. And when she passed away 10 years ago, she did not leave it to your father." Jordan shared his screen. A scanned document appeared. It was old. The edges yellowed even in the digital scan, but the legal seal of the county probate court was clear. "This is your grandmother's last will and testament," Jordan explained. "The real one, not whatever summary your parents showed you when you were 18. I leaned in, reading the clause Jordan had circled. "Item 4. To my granddaughter, Joanna Marie Ortiz, I bequeath the entirety of the real property known as Maple Shore, including all structures and land thereon. It is my hope that she will find the stability and home here that she has always sought." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Grandma Rose left it to me?" "She did," Jordan said. "And look at the date of probate. Your parents were the executors. They had a fiduciary duty to transfer the deed to your name when you turned 21. Instead, they buried this will. They filed a petition for administration without will in a different county court, claiming the original was lost, and produced a draft from years earlier that left everything to them. It was a sophisticated legal shell game. I remembered the day I turned 18. My father had sat me down at the kitchen table with a somber look. He had handed me a single sheet of paper, a typed summary. Grandma left everything to us to manage for the family. He had said, "She knew you were going to be transient. She wanted to make sure the property was in responsible hands." I had believed him. I had signed the waiver he put in front of me, thinking I was respecting my grandmother's wishes. I thought she didn't trust me either. That had been the first brick in the wall of my insecurity. The belief that even the one person who seemed to love me, my grandmother, thought I was too unstable to inherit anything. "It was a lie," I whispered. "It was all a lie." "They viewed Ivy as the worthy one," Jordan said, his voice hard. "But Ivy is not the one Rose chose. Rose chose you, and for 10 years, your parents have been squatting on your land, collecting revenue from your property, and now forging your name to mortgage your own inheritance to give cash to your sister. They used my own asset as collateral. I realized the absurdity of it, making me dizzy. They needed my signature on that loan not just as a guarantor, but because the bank's title search probably flagged a discrepancy with the deed. By getting me to co-sign, they bypassed the need to explain why my name was still lingering on the old title records. Exactly, Jordan said. They trapped you in a loop. They stole your inheritance, then used your legal claim to that inheritance to rob you again. I stood up and walked to the window. The Chicago winter sun was blinding, but I felt cold. For my entire adult life, I had felt like a guest in my own family. I felt like the spare part, the backup plan, the disappointment. But the truth was the opposite. I was the owner. I was the heir. They were the ones living on borrowed time and stolen ground. What are my options? I asked, turning back to the screens where my two generals waited. We go nuclear, Jordan said without hesitation. We file a motion to reopen the probate case based on fraud and newly discovered evidence. We file a quiet title action to confirm your ownership of the land, and we sue for 10 years of back rent and misappropriated profits. We can evict them. Joanna, legally, they are trespassing. If we do that, Malik added, the bank loan becomes an immediate catastrophe for them, since the collateral, the land, was pledged by people who did not legally own it. The bank will call the note. They will demand the cash back immediately, and since Ivy spent it, the house of cards falls down, I finished. I looked at the signature on the will again. Grandma Rose's handwriting was spidery and elegant. She had seen me. She had seen the quiet, nerdy girl who sat on the dock drawing sketches of buildings, and she had wanted to give me a foundation. My parents had stolen that foundation and given the bricks to Ivy. They had not just stolen money, they had stolen my sense of belonging. They had let me believe I was unworthy so they could keep their golden child comfortable. Do it, I said. Start the process. But Jordan, do not serve them the eviction papers yet. I want the title secured first. I want the legal confirmation that the ground they are walking on belongs to me. I will have the filings ready by tomorrow morning, Jordan promised. We are going to correct the record. Joanna, the law is entirely on your side. Malik, I said, keep tracking the money. I want to know exactly how much of my inheritance went into Ivy's pockets over the last decade. Every birthday check, every loan from Mom and Dad. I want an itemized bill. Consider it done, Malik said. The call ended, and the screens went dark, leaving me with my reflection. I looked different than I had an hour ago. The imposter syndrome that had plagued me for years, the nagging voice that said my parents were right and I was just lucky, vanished. I was not the failure, I was the landlord. I pulled up a satellite map of Maple Falls on my tablet. I zoomed in on the edge of the lake, where the Maple Shore Inn sat amidst the trees. It looked small from up here, insignificant. I traced the property line with my finger. You told me to leave, I said softly to the empty room. You told me to go live in the streets, but you forgot to check who owns the street. I picked up my digital pen and wrote a single note on my tablet, directly over the image of the house where I had been humiliated. Property of Joanna Ortiz. I was done being the victim. I was done being the daughter who begged for scraps of affection. I was now the creditor, and the Ortiz family was past due. The rumor mill in Maple Falls moved faster than fiber optic internet, and by Wednesday afternoon, my reputation had been completely dismantled, restructured, and sold to the public as a tragedy. I sat in my office in Chicago, watching the snow fall against the glass, while my cousin Elise provided a play-by-play of my character assassination via text message. It seemed that my mother had been busy. She had run into Mrs. Gable at the grocery store and the Reverend at the post office, and the story she planted was consistent, devastating, and entirely fabricated. According to my mother, I was not just struggling, I was mentally unstable. I was lost. She told them I had shown up at Christmas looking disheveled and manic, demanding money, and that I was currently drifting somewhere between Chicago and Cleveland, refusing to let the family help me. She is telling people you are unreachable, Elise texted. She actually used the word vagrant when talking to the choir director, Joanna. Half the town thinks you are living in a shelter. I read the messages with a cold detachment that surprised even me. A few years ago, this would have crushed me. I would have called my mother in tears, begging her to stop, desperate to prove I was worthy of respect. Now, I just saw it for what it was, a preemptive strike. They knew the loan was about to be flagged. They knew the money was running out. They were painting me as the villain in advance so that when the bank froze the accounts, they could claim it was because their unstable daughter had done something spiteful, rather than admitting they had committed fraud. Then came Ivy. My sister did not rely on the grocery store gossip circuit. She was a creature of the digital age, and she knew how to weaponize pity. I pulled up her Instagram on my secure tablet. She had posted a story an hour ago. It was a selfie taken in the back office of her clinic. The lighting carefully arranged to make her look exhausted but brave. She was wearing her white lab coat, rubbing her temples. The caption read, "Some days it is hard to be the only one holding it all together. The family business is struggling, and despite asking for help, I am carrying this burden alone. It hurts when family turns their back on legacy, but I will keep fighting for mom and dad." Family first burden. Stronger every day. I took a screenshot. Then I saved it to a folder labeled Evidence. "She is setting the stage," I said to the empty room. "She is framing the narrative that the inn is failing because I refused to help, not because she drained its accounts." It was brilliant, in a sociopathic sort of way. If the inn went under, Ivy would be the martyr who tried to save it, and I would be the selfish sister who let it burn. I needed more than screenshots. I needed a confession. I checked the laws. Illinois was a two-party consent state for recording calls, but Ohio was a one-party consent state, since the crime, the fraud, occurred in Ohio, and the victims, the bank and the land trust, were tied to Ohio jurisdiction. Jordan had advised me that recording a call to gather evidence of a felony committed against me was legally defensible, provided I was in a jurisdiction that allowed it. I picked up my burner phone, the one with the area code that would look local, and drove across the state line into Indiana, pulling into a rest stop just to be absolutely certain I was in a one-party consent jurisdiction. I hit record. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the third ring. "Hello?" "Mom," I said. My voice was calm, stripped of any warmth. "Joanna?" She sounded wary, her tone shifting instantly. "We have been so worried. Where are you? People are asking questions, and I do not know what to tell them." "I know what you are telling them," I said. "Elise told me. You are telling people I am homeless." "Well, you certainly looked like it," she snapped, abandoning the concern. "Running off like that, driving a rental car. What were we supposed to think?" "You could have thought to ask me," I said, "but we are not talking about my living situation right now. We are talking about the bank." There was a pause, a heavy, guilty silence. "I do not know what you mean," she said, but her voice wavered. "I received an email from First National Bank. Mom," I said, lying slightly about the timeline to press her. "They sent me a renewal notice for a loan guarantee, a loan I never signed for." "Oh, that," she said, her voice pitching up, dismissive and airy. "That is just paperwork. Joanna, do not worry about it. Dad handled it." "Dad forged my signature," I corrected her. "That is a crime. It is called bank fraud." "Do not use that word with me," she hissed. "It was not fraud. It was necessary. The inn needed capital. The roof was leaking. The heating system was dying. We needed the money to keep the business alive, and your credit was available. We knew you would want to help." "If it was for the roof," I said, looking at the spreadsheet Malik had sent me, "why was the money transferred to Ivy?" The silence on the other end was absolute. I had caught her. "Mom," I pressed, "I can see the records. You took $150,000 in my name, and you gave it to Ivy's spa." "She needed it," my mother exploded, the pretense of the inn's repairs vanishing. "She had an opportunity to expand. It was a sure thing. Joanna. She just needed a bridge loan to get the new equipment. She is going to pay it back. She is successful. She is a doctor. So you stole my identity to fund her career, I stated. We borrowed it, she yelled. And why do you care? You do not have anything to lose. We figured you would not even notice. You said you were doing fine with your computer work. If you are making so much money like you claim, why does it matter if we used your name for a little bit? You can afford the risk. Ivy needed the help. You did not. I felt a cold chill settle in my chest. There it was. The admission. So you admit you signed my name without my permission because you assumed I had money to cover it? I asked. I admit that families help each other, she retorted. And frankly, Joanna, you owe this family. We raised you. We fed you. And what have you ever given back? Nothing. You come home once a year. You sit there with that sour face, and you contribute nothing. Ivy stays here. Ivy takes care of us. If using your name helps her build something that brings glory to this family, then you should be honored to help. Honored, I repeated, to be a victim of a felony. Stop talking like a lawyer, she spat. It makes you sound cold. Just sign the renewal paper when it comes in the mail and stop making a scene. Do not ruin Ivy's momentum. She is finally getting the recognition she deserves. I am not signing anything, Mom, I said. If you do not sign it, the bank will call the loan, she shrieked. Do you want to destroy us? Do you want to destroy your sister? I think you managed that on your own, I said. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. I saved the recording. I emailed the file immediately to Jordan Price with the subject line, Confession, Admissible Evidence. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the trucks roll by on the highway. My mother's words echoed in my head. You owe this family. They truly believed that. They believed my existence was a resource to be harvested for Ivy's benefit. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as an asset class to be liquidated when their golden child needed cash. My phone buzzed again. It was Malik. Please tell me you are not in Ohio, he said. I am on the border, I said. Why? Because the alerts just tripped again, Malik said, his voice urgent. Someone is trying to open a line of credit at a furniture warehouse in Cleveland, and 5 minutes before that, a credit check was run by a luxury car leasing agency. They are panic buying. Joanna, they must suspect the main loan is about to be frozen, and they are trying to grab as much credit as they can in your name before the lock engages. It is Ivy, I said. She knows the cash flow from the inn is about to stop. She is trying to furnish her waiting room or lease a new car before the house of cards collapses. I blocked them, Malik said. I put a hard freeze on your credit files with all 3 bureaus 10 minutes ago. The applications were denied instantly. But Joanna, they are not stopping. They are going to keep trying until they hit a wall. They just hit it, I said. I put the car in gear and merged back onto the highway, heading toward Chicago. The sadness I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a clarity as sharp as a diamond. They had not just borrowed my name, they were actively looting me. If I had not been who I was, if I had actually been the struggling, poor daughter they thought I was, this would have destroyed me. I would have been buried in debt I couldn't pay. I would have been sued. I would have been ruined. They were willing to kill me financially to keep Ivy warm. I drove back to the city in silence, my mind constructing the next phase. I had the will. I had the proof of fraud. I had the confession. When I got back to the penthouse, I walked straight to my desk. I opened a physical notebook, a leather-bound journal I used for high-level strategy. I picked up a pen and wrote a single word at the top of the page. Endgame. Below it, I began to list the steps. Step 1. Secure the asset. Step 2. Public exposure. Step 3. The eviction. They wanted a story. They wanted to tell the town about the poor, unstable Joanna who let her family down. I was going to give them a story. All right, but it wasn't going to be the one they were writing on Facebook. I picked up my phone and called Jordan. File the papers, I said. And Jordan, accept the invitation for the Cleveland Business Gala. I just saw on the guest list that the Maple Falls Chamber of Commerce bought a table. You are going to go? Jordan asked. Oh, I am not just going, I said, staring at the lights of the city that I had conquered. I am the keynote speaker. It was time to introduce my family to the person they had been stealing from. It was time for them to meet the CEO. The heavy cream envelope sat on my glass desk like a subpoena, but it was actually an invitation. The embossed gold lettering read, "The Cleveland Summit on Innovation and Midwest Economic Growth." It was the premier business event of the season, a gathering of venture capitalists, tech disruptors, and old money industrialists trying to stay relevant. I was not just invited. I was the keynote speaker. The topic they had assigned me was the invisible infrastructure, how automation is rebuilding the Rust Belt. It was ironic. I was about to give a speech on rebuilding while simultaneously planning a very personal demolition. You know they are going to be there, Malik said from the doorway of my office. He was holding a tablet, displaying the guest list for the gala. I am counting on it, I replied, not looking up from the merger documents I was signing. They bought a table, Joanna, Malik continued, his voice tinged with disbelief. A platinum table. That costs $5,000. Your mother put it on a credit card that, surprisingly, is actually in her own name, though it is nearly maxed out. I leaned back in my chair, spinning a heavy metal pen between my fingers. They are desperate. They know the loan money has vanished into Ivy's clinic, and they know the bank is asking questions. They are going to this gala to hunt for a private investor. They think they can charm some angel investor into saving the Maple Shore Inn before the house of cards collapses. They are going fishing for a shark, Malik said with a dark grin, and they have no idea the great white is already in the water. Get Jordan and the rep from Northbridge Capital in here, I said. It is time to set the board. 20 minutes later, my office felt less like a tech HQ and more like a war room. Jordan Price sat to my left, his legal pad filled with precise notes. Across from us was Marcus Thorne, a senior partner at Northbridge Capital, a private equity firm I often partnered with for distressed asset acquisitions. Marcus did not know about my family drama. To him, this was just business. That was exactly how I wanted it. We have set up the shell entity as requested, Marcus said, sliding a binder across the table. Lawson Harbor Holdings. It is registered in Delaware, fully anonymous, on paper. It looks like a standard real estate acquisition vehicle. You are the sole beneficiary, but your name appears nowhere on the public filing. Excellent, I said, opening the binder. And the acquisition strategy? Standard distressed asset play, Marcus explained. We have flagged the Maple Shore Inn as a high-risk property. If the current loan goes into default, which, based on your intel, seems imminent, the bank will look to offload the bad debt quickly to clean up their balance sheet. They will sell the note for pennies on the dollar to avoid a lengthy foreclosure process. And Lawson Harbor Holdings will be the first in line to buy that note, I said. Precisely. Marcus nodded. Once Lawson Harbor owns the debt, you become the lender. You can call the note due immediately. If they cannot pay, and we know they cannot, you foreclose. The property is yours within 60 days. It is clean, Jordan added, and it bypasses the probate court fight. Even if the will contest drags on for years, this allows you to seize control of the physical property through financial leverage almost immediately. Do it, I said. Prepare the capital. Be ready to move the moment the bank declares the loan in default. Marcus left the room. Pleased with what he thought was a routine real estate snatchit, Jordan remained behind, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You are really going to do this, Jordan said. You are going to buy your parents' debt and foreclose on them. I am buying my land back, I corrected him. They are just the squatters who happen to have a mortgage on it. Did you file the affidavit? Jordan nodded, pulling a file from his briefcase. I submitted the affidavit of forgery to First National Bank of Ohio this morning at 9 o'clock. I included the forensic report on the signature discrepancy and your sworn statement that you never authorized the guarantee. I also attached the wire transfer record showing the funds were diverted to Serene Ivy LLC. And the result? The bank's risk management department is legally obligated to freeze the account immediately, Jordan said. As of right now, the Maple Shore Inn has zero access to credit. Any checks they wrote yesterday will bounce tomorrow. The credit line is dead. They will receive the notification letter in about 48 hours. Just in time for them to be panic-stricken at the gala, I mused. Joanna, Jordan said softly, this is going to be public. When you walk onto that stage, there is no going back. You are destroying the version of you that exists in their heads. Are you ready for the fallout? I stood up and walked to the closet in the corner of my office. I pulled out a garment bag and unzipped it. Inside was not a business suit, but a dress. It was black, simple, terrifyingly elegant. It was a floor-length slip dress made of heavy silk that moved like liquid shadow. It had no sequins, no ruffles, no desperate cries for attention. It was the kind of dress that whispered power rather than screaming for it. It was the antithesis of everything Ivy wore. Ivy wore bright colors and excessive jewelry to prove she was someone. I wore this because I knew who I was. I spent 34 years being the backup plan, I said, running my hand over the cold silk. I spent my whole life shrinking so Ivy would have room to shine. I let them tell people I was a failure because I was afraid that if I showed them the truth, they would just use me for my money. I turned back to Jordan. But they used me anyway, I said. They stole from me when they thought I had nothing. They do not deserve the daughter they think they have, and they certainly do not deserve the woman I actually am. So no mercy? Jordan asked. Justice is not about mercy, Jordan. It is about balance. I walked back to the desk and picked up the pen again. They bet everything on a lie. I am just calling the bluff. I signed the authorization for Lawson Harbor Holdings to transfer $2 million into an escrow account, ready to snap up the Maple Shore Inn the second it hit the market. Tonight, I said, I am not Joanna the sister. I am not Joanna the daughter. Tonight, I am the keynote speaker, and I think it is time the Ortiz family learned a lesson in economics. I looked at the clock. The car was waiting downstairs. The drive to Cleveland would take 5 hours. I went into the private bathroom adjoining my office to change. When I looked in the mirror, the transformation was complete. The messy bun was gone, replaced by a sleek, sharp bob that framed my face like a helmet. The glasses were gone, replaced by contact lenses that made my gaze piercing. The comfortable, oversized sweaters were gone, replaced by the black silk armor. I put on a pair of diamond studs, real ones, worth more than Ivy's car, and applied a coat of dark red lipstick. The woman in the mirror did not look like she came from Maple Falls. She looked like she could buy Maple Falls. I walked out to where Jordan and Malik were waiting. Malik let out a low whistle. "Damn, boss," Malik said. "You look lethal." "That is the point," I said. "Let's go to Cleveland." As the Tesla sped onto the highway, cutting through the winter gloom, I pulled up the seating chart for the gala one last time. My table was front and center, labeled simply NovaFlux Systems. My parents' table was 3 rows back, near the kitchen doors. I imagined them sitting there, my father in his ill-fitting suit, my mother nervously clutching her fake designer bag, Ivy scanning the room for potential victims to charm. They would be waiting for the keynote speaker, expecting some old man in a suit. They had no idea that the person holding the microphone and the person holding the deed to their future was the girl they told to go live in the streets. I watched the miles tick by on the dashboard. Every mile was a step away from the past and a step toward the inevitable collision. "Malik," I said from the back seat, "make sure the press kit is ready. When I finish that speech, I want every investor in that room to know exactly what NovaFlux is worth." "Already done," Malik said. "By the time you step off that stage, you will be the most talked-about CEO in the Midwest." I closed my eyes and smiled. The trap was set. The pieces were moving, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my family. I was just waiting for them to catch up. The hammer dropped on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 48 hours after Jordan had filed the paperwork. I was in the middle of a strategy session with my engineering team when my phone lit up with a secure notification from Jordan. It was a single line of text that signaled the end of my family's deception. Affidavit validated. Account status frozen. Dispute active. I dismissed the engineers, asking for 5 minutes of privacy, and called Jordan immediately. "Tell me," I said, pacing the length of my office. "The bank did their internal review," Jordan said, his voice crisp and professional. "They compared the signature on the guarantee to the exemplars we provided from your actual legal filings. It was not even a close call. Joanna." The risk officer realized within 10 minutes that they were holding a fraudulent document. "They have officially flagged the loan as disputed fraudulent activity." "And the money?" I asked. "The tap is dry," Jordan confirmed. "First National has frozen the entire credit facility pending a full investigation. That means no more drawdowns, no more transfers. And, crucially, they have put a hold on the operating account attached to the loan to recoup their potential losses. Your parents cannot buy a carton of milk with that business card right now." I walked to the window, looking out at the gray Chicago sky. I imagined the scene in the kitchen of the Maple Shore Inn, my mother trying to run a card at the grocery supply store, the decline message flashing on the terminal, my father calling the bank in a panic, only to be transferred to the fraud department. "They are going to know it was me," I said. "They already do," Jordan replied. "But here is the interesting part. They are not acting like people who got caught stealing. They are acting like victims." As if on cue, a message popped up on my laptop screen from my cousin Elise. "It is a war zone over here. Uncle Dave just smashed a plate. He is screaming that you are trying to bankrupt them on purpose. Mom says Aunt Martha told her you flagged the loan out of pure selfishness because you did not want to share your credit score. They are telling everyone who will listen that you are destroying the family legacy because you are bitter about Ivy's success." I read the message twice, letting the absurdity sink in. Even now, facing federal fraud allegations, they could not admit they were wrong. In their minds, my name was their property, and my refusal to let them use it was an act of aggression. "Jordan," I said into the phone, "what is the status on the criminal charges?" "That is the next decision point," Jordan said, his tone shifting to something more grave. "The bank is legally required to file a suspicious activity report with the feds. However, regarding pressing formal charges for identity theft and forgery, that is up to you, if you give the go-ahead. I can have a detective at their door by dinner. We have enough for an arrest warrant. This is a felony. Joanna, they could do 3 to 5 years." I closed my eyes. I pictured my father in an orange jumpsuit. I pictured my mother, frail and terrified, in a holding cell. Despite everything, despite the insults, the theft, the years of neglect, the image made my stomach turn. I did not want to be the daughter who put her parents in prison. That was a line I could not cross. Not for them, but for myself. I did not want to carry that weight. "No," I said softly. "No prison." "Are you sure?" Jordan asked. "They stole $150,000. "I know," I said, my voice hardening. "But if I put them in jail, they become martyrs. The town will pity them. They will say the ungrateful daughter locked up her elderly parents. I do not want their freedom. Jordan, I want their delusion. I want to take the one thing they value more than me, the property they have been lording over everyone." "Understood," Jordan said. "We stick to the civil and financial route. We bleed them out." "Exactly. What is the next step with the asset?" "Marcus at Northbridge Capital just pinged me," Jordan said. "Now that the loan is in dispute and the operating accounts are frozen, the Maple Shore Inn is technically insolvent. They cannot service the debt. The bank is going to move the note to their toxic asset pile immediately to clear their books before the quarter ends. They will want to sell the debt to a third party just to get some cash back. Tell Marcus to buy it," I said. "Lawson Harbor Holdings is ready. Offer them 60 cents on the dollar. The bank will take it just to avoid the legal headache of the fraud investigation." "It is a bold move," Jordan warned. "Once Lawson Harbor owns the debt, you effectively become your parents' lender. You hold the mortgage. And when they miss the next payment? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You initiate foreclosure, Jordan said, and since you also have the claim on the land via the will, it will be the fastest foreclosure in Ohio history. You will own the building, the business, and the dirt it sits on within 60 days. Do it, I said. Send over the purchase agreement. I will sign it now. I hung up and turned to Malik, who had been silently monitoring the financial feeds on the big screen. How is Ivy holding up? I asked. Malik grimaced. Not well. It turns out Serene Ivy Clinic was not just funded by the initial theft. She has been using the inn's revolving line of credit to cover her monthly operating shortfalls. She was floating payroll on your parents' debt. Now that the bank froze the inn's accounts, her transfer scheduled for this morning bounced. She cannot pay her staff? She cannot pay her staff. She cannot pay the lease on her fancy laser machines. And she certainly cannot pay the rent on her storefront, Malik said, tapping a graph that showed a sharp red line dropping vertically. She is insolvent. Joanna. She just does not know it yet because the eviction notices have not been printed. She is frantically calling lenders, but with her personal credit utilization at 98%, nobody is going to touch her. I looked at the graph. It was a mathematical representation of my sister's hubris. She had walked around like a queen, screaming at me to go live in the streets, while her entire kingdom was built on a swamp of debt that I was unknowingly underwriting. She called me a failure, I whispered. She told me I had no real job. And now she's about to find out what a real bankruptcy looks like, Malik said. The bank just flagged 2 more attempted transactions from her debit card. Declined? She is trying to buy a table for the gala tonight. She is still going to the gala? I asked, surprised by her denial. They have to, Malik said. It is their Hail Mary. They think if they can just meet a wealthy investor tonight, they can get a private loan to pay off the bank and make this all go away. They are desperate. Joanna, they are going into that room looking for a savior. I walked back to my desk and opened the secure document Jordan had just emailed. It was the purchase agreement for the distressed debt of the Maple Shore Inn. The document was dense, full of legal clauses about assignment of rights and collateral. I scrolled to the bottom. Purchaser, Lawson Harbor Holdings, authorized signatory. I picked up my digital stylus. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, my real name, the one they had forged, the one they had mocked. With that signature, I effectively bought my family's fate. I was no longer just their daughter. I was the institution they owed money to. I hit send. It is done, I told Malik. Lawson Harbor Holdings owns the note. Congratulations, Malik said, though his face was serious. You just bought a hotel. No, I said, staring at the screen. I just bought the truth. The afternoon dragged on, the tension in the office palpable. I went through the motions of preparing for the gala, checking my speech, reviewing the investor packets, but my mind was 300 miles away. At 5 p.m, as I was putting on the diamond earrings that cost more than the mortgage I had just purchased, a final email notification chimed on my phone. It was an automated alert from the legal system, forwarded by Jordan's paralegal. Subject: Notice of Default and Acceleration. Reference: Maple Shore Inn, Ortiz. Status: Foreclosure proceedings initiated. The machine had started. The letters were being printed. By Monday morning, a process server would be walking up the driveway of the inn to tape a notice to the front door. But tonight, they would be at the gala. Tonight, they would be drinking champagne they couldn't afford, smiling at strangers, desperate to find a lifeline. They did not know that the lifeline had already been cut. They did not know that the foreclosure notice was already in the mail. And they certainly did not know that the woman they were hoping to avoid, the embarrassment of the family, was about to walk onto the stage and own the room. I grabbed my clutch and walked to the door where Malik was waiting with my coat. Ready? Malik asked. I have been ready for 10 years, I said. I walked out into the cold Chicago night. Stepping into the back of the waiting car, as we pulled away from the curb, heading toward the highway that would take me to Cleveland. I looked at the city lights one last time. My sister had told me to go live in the streets. I checked my reflection in the dark window. I was not going to the streets. I was going to the podium. And when I was done, there would be nowhere left for them to hide. The grand ballroom of the Renaissance. Cleveland Hotel was a cavern of crystal chandeliers, velvet drapery, and the low, expensive hum of 300 wealthy people discussing capital gains. The air smelled of roasted duck, expensive cologne, and, in the corner where my family sat, desperation. I stood in the shadows of the entrance hall, my hand resting lightly on the arm of my cousin Elise. She was trembling slightly in her satin gown, her eyes wide as she scanned the room. "They are over there," Elise whispered, tilting her head toward the table 24, near the kitchen service doors. "Joanna, look at them. They look terrified." I followed her gaze. My parents and Ivy were huddled together at a table that was clearly the cheapest tier available. My father was wearing a suit that was a decade out of style, the lapels too wide, the fabric shining under the harsh lights. My mother was nervously clutching her purse, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected a debt collector to jump out from behind a centerpiece. And then there was Ivy. My sister was wearing a bright, aggressive red dress that screamed for attention. She was leaning over the table, talking animatedly to a bored-looking man next to her, likely pitching him on an investment in her failing clinic or the sinking ship that was the Maple Shore Inn. She looked manic. She looked like a woman who was trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. "They have no idea," Elise murmured. "They think you are in a shelter in Chicago." "Let them think it for 5 more minutes," I said, adjusting the strap of my black silk dress. "Come on, our table is at the front." We moved through the crowd. I walked with a purpose I had never possessed in Maple Falls. Heads turned as I passed. People didn't recognize me as Joanna the failure. They recognized me as power. I nodded to a few associates, a venture capitalist from Detroit, a tech CEO from Columbus. We sat down at the table labeled Nova Flux Systems. It was directly in front of the stage. I sat with my back to my family, letting the anticipation build. The lights dimmed, the chatter died down. The master of ceremonies, a well-known local news anchor, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate innovation. We are here to look at the future of the Midwest. And to kick off our evening, it is my distinct honor to introduce a woman who has single-handedly revolutionized supply chain logistics in the Great Lakes region. Her company, Nova Flux Systems, generated over $80 million in revenue this year alone. Please welcome your keynote speaker, CEO Joanna Ortiz." The applause started as a polite ripple and quickly swelled into a roar. I stood up. I did not look back at table 24. I did not need to. I could feel their gaze burning into my back. I walked up the stairs to the stage, the spotlight catching the diamonds in my ears and the sharp, sleek cut of my hair. I took the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. And then, I found them. The reaction was more satisfying than any screaming match could have been. They were frozen, absolutely petrified. Ivy's mouth was hanging open, her glass of wine halfway to her lips, suspended in midair. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her eyes bulging. My father was squinting, leaning forward, looking like he was trying to solve a physics equation that didn't make sense. They were looking at a ghost. They were looking at the daughter they had thrown away, realized in high definition as the most powerful person in the room. I leaned into the microphone. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "Tonight, I want to talk about value. Specifically, the value of things we choose not to see." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. In the world of logistics, we have a saying: the most critical infrastructure is the invisible kind. It is the foundation that holds up the skyscraper. It is the code that runs the server. It is the silent work that goes unnoticed until it stops. And too often, we treat these invisible pillars as disposable. We assume they will always be there, bearing the weight, no matter how much we neglect them. I looked directly at table 24. Even from this distance, I saw my mother flinch. I built my company on a simple principle, I continued, my voice echoing with authority. Do not underestimate the structural integrity of what you think is beneath you, because when you chip away at the foundation long enough, when you take and take without giving anything back, you do not just lose the building, you get buried in the rubble. The room was captivated. The investors were nodding, thinking I was talking about server maintenance and supply chains, but my family knew. I saw Ivy's face turn a pale, sickly white. She understood. Every word was a blade. The invisible infrastructure was me. I was the one who had propped them up, the one whose name they had used, whose credit they had stolen, whose existence they had devalued while they built their shaky little lives on my back. Success is not about who shouts the loudest, I said, finishing my speech. It is about who owns the ground you are standing on. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. I walked off the stage, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. As soon as I stepped off the final stair, I was surrounded. Joanna, incredible speech. Marcus Thorne from Northbridge Capital was the first to reach me, shaking my hand vigorously. Listen, the paperwork on the acquisition is finalized. The bank is ready to move the Maple Shore Inn debt into your portfolio by tomorrow morning. He said it loudly. He said it clearly. I saw my father, who had stumbled away from his table and was trying to push through the crowd toward me, stop dead in his tracks. He heard it. Maple Shore Inn debt. Acquisition. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice cool. I am looking forward to closing the deal. I have some very specific plans for that property. Joanna? The voice was shrill, trembling, and pathetic. I turned slowly. Ivy was standing there. She looked small. The red dress that had seemed so bold 10 minutes ago now looked cheap and garish next to the tailored tuxedos and couture gowns of the people surrounding me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like a child who had lost her mother in a supermarket. Joanna? She repeated, her voice cracking. Is that you? The circle of investors quieted down, sensing the tension. They looked from the powerful CEO to the disheveled woman in the red dress. Hello, Ivy, I said. I did not offer a hug. I did not smile. I looked at her with the same professional detachment I used for a vendor who had missed a delivery deadline. I do not understand, Ivy stammered, wringing her hands. They said CEO? You run NovaFlux? I founded NovaFlux, I corrected her. But she looked around at the people staring at her. She tried to salvage the situation. She put on a shaky, fake smile and reached out to touch my arm. Oh my God, this is amazing. Why didn't you tell us? Mom, Dad, come here. Look at Joanna. My sister is a CEO. Can you believe it? She was trying to claim me. She was trying to pivot, to wrap herself in my success so she wouldn't drown. I stepped back, letting her hand drop into empty air. I think there is a misunderstanding, I said, loud enough for Marcus and the others to hear. I am here strictly on business, Ms. Ortiz, and judging by the notification my legal team received today regarding the unauthorized use of my financial identity, I think it is best if we do not pretend to be close. The air left the room. Ivy froze. The smile died on her face. My parents had reached the edge of the circle now. My mother looked old. For the first time, I saw her not as the matriarch who controlled my life, but as a terrified elderly woman who realized she had bet on the wrong horse. My father looked at me with a mixture of awe and horror. He realized that the computer thing he had mocked was an empire, and the daughter he had called unstable was the one holding the axe. Joanna, my father rasped, we need to talk. I believe my attorney, Jordan Price, is doing all the talking for me right now, I said. He sent a letter to the bank regarding the forgery. I assume you received the notification that your accounts are frozen? My mother let out a small, strangled sob. We are family, my father pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. Joanna, please, the inn. We are trying to find an investor. If we do not find money tonight—" "You are not going to find an investor here," I said, cutting him off, "because everyone in this room knows that the debt has already been purchased." I looked at Marcus. "Isn't that right, Marcus?" "Deal is closing at 9 tomorrow morning," Marcus confirmed, looking at my father with cold indifference. "Lawson Harbor Holdings is taking over the note." "Lawson Harbor?" Ivy whispered. "Who is that?" I stepped forward, leaning in close so only they could hear me. The smell of Ivy's cheap perfume made me nauseous, but I held my ground. "You told me to go live in the streets." "Ivy?" I said softly. "So I bought the street. Lawson Harbor is me. I am the bank now." Ivy's knees actually buckled. She grabbed my father's arm to stay upright. "You?" my mother gasped. "You are buying the inn?" "I am buying the debt," I clarified, "which means you do not owe the bank anymore. You owe me." I checked my watch, a platinum timepiece that cost more than their car. "I have to go," I said. "I have a dinner meeting with the mayor. Enjoy the gala. I hear the chicken is dry, but at least the tickets were non-refundable, so you might as well eat." I turned my back on them. "Joanna!" my mother cried out, a desperate, wailing sound that drew stares from half the room. "You cannot do this. We are your parents." I did not stop. I did not turn around. I walked away, flanked by Elise, Marcus, and the security of my own success. I left them standing there in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by wealth they could never touch. Realizing that the daughter they had spit on was the only god in the room, and she had just stopped listening to their prayers. The restaurant I had chosen for the final negotiation was called The Pier, a sleek, glass-walled establishment overlooking the Cuyahoga River. It was neutral ground, public enough to prevent a screaming match, but private enough to destroy a family legacy without spectators. I arrived precisely at noon. My family was already there. They were seated at a round table near the window, looking like a group of people waiting for a firing squad. The arrogance from the Christmas dinner was gone. The desperation from the gala was gone. In their place was a heavy, suffocating silence. When I approached the table, my mother was the first to react. She jumped slightly, then plastered a smile on her face that was so brittle I thought it might crack the foundation. "Joanna," she exclaimed, her voice pitching too high, "we ordered you an iced tea, just the way you used to like it in high school, with lemon." "I drink espresso now," I said, ignoring the glass. I pulled out my chair and sat down. Ivy was sitting across from me. She had traded the red gala dress for a modest gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked tired. "Hey, Joe," she said, trying for a tone of sisterly intimacy. "Look, about last night. We were all just so surprised. I mean, Nova Flux? That is incredible. I told my staff this morning that my sister is basically the Elon Musk of the Midwest." "Stop," I said. I did not raise my voice. I simply held up a hand. "We are not doing this. We are not doing the small talk. We are not doing the fake pride. We are just trying to have a nice lunch," my father muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. He was shredding a paper napkin into tiny, snowy piles. "We are not here for lunch," I said. "We are here for a settlement." I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick black folder. I placed it in the center of the table. The sound of it hitting the wood was heavy. Final. "What is that?" my mother asked, eyeing the folder warily. "That," I said, opening it, "is the end of the road." I laid out the documents one by one, forming a grid of evidence on the white tablecloth. First, the forensic report confirming the forgery on the bank loan. Second, the wire transfer records showing the money moving from the inn to Ivy's clinic. Third, and most damning, the certified copy of Grandma Rose's original will. And finally, the notice of default and acceleration from Lawson Harbor Holdings. "I know about the will," I said, watching my parents' faces pale. "I know Grandma left the land to me 10 years ago. I know you hid it. I know you filed a false probate petition claiming she died intestate so you could keep control." My father stopped shredding the napkin. He looked up, his face gray. Joanna, we were protecting the property. You were 18. You were leaving for college. You would have sold it. It was not yours to protect, I said. It was mine. You have been squatting on my land for a decade, and then you used your squatter's rights to forge my signature and take out a loan against property that legally belonged to me anyway. We needed the money, my mother pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. The inn was struggling. The roof needed repairs. We did it for the family survival. Stop lying, I cut in. I tapped the wire transfer record with my index finger. $135,000. Transferred to Serene Ivy LLC. You did not fix the roof. Mom, you bought Ivy a laser hair removal machine and a marble reception desk. I looked at Ivy. She shrank back in her chair. You knew, I said to her. You knew they used my name. You knew the money came from a fraudulent loan, and you spent it anyway. It was an investment, Ivy blurted out, her voice trembling. The clinic was going to make millions. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a runway. Joanna, you have so much money now. $40 million a year? That is what the article said. Why do you care about $100,000? It is pocket change to you. It is not about the amount, I said coldly. It is about the fact that you felt entitled to steal it. You stood in that dining room on Christmas and screamed that I should go live in the streets, all while you were paying your rent with money stolen from my credit line. You are being cruel, my mother sobbed, grabbing a napkin. How can you be so cold? We are your flesh and blood. You are trying to destroy us over money. I am not destroying you, I said. I am holding you accountable. There is a difference, though I do not expect you to understand it. I pushed the final document toward them. It was a legal agreement, drafted by Jordan Price that morning. Here is the situation, I said, leaning forward. Lawson Harbor Holdings, which is wholly owned by me, now owns the debt on the Maple Shore Inn. The loan is in default. I have the legal right to foreclose immediately. I also have the legal right to sue you for 10 years of back rent and profits from the land you stole. And most importantly, I have the evidence to send the FBI to your doorstep for bank fraud and identity theft. My mother let out a strangled gasp. My father looked like he was having a heart attack. However, I continued, I do not want to visit my parents in federal prison. It is bad for my company's image, and frankly, I do not want to waste the energy. So what do you want? My father asked, his voice hoarse. I want the inn, I said. Not just the debt, the keys, the deed, the business, everything. You are going to sign this document. It is a confession of judgment and a voluntary surrender of deed in lieu of foreclosure. You are going to sign over the Maple Shore Inn to Lawson Harbor Holdings effective immediately. In exchange, I will not press criminal charges, and I will not sue you for the back rent. You are kicking us out? My mother wailed. This is our home. We have lived there for 30 years. You have lived there for 10 years on my charity without knowing it, I corrected her. And you can keep living there for 30 days. After that, you need to find new arrangements. Joanna, please, Ivy begged. If you take the inn, Mom and Dad have nothing. And if you cut off the funding, my clinic goes under. I have a lease. I have employees. Then I suggest you learn to code, I said, or find a job that does not require embezzled funds to operate. I cannot sign this, my father said, shaking his head. I cannot give away my legacy. Your legacy is a lie. Dad, I said, and if you do not sign it, I will call the U.S. Attorney's Office before I leave this table. Jordan has the complaint drafted. All I have to do is text him the word, go. You will be arrested by dinner. Ivy will be indicted as a co-conspirator for receiving stolen funds. Is that the legacy you want? The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The waiter approached to ask if we wanted to order, took one look at my mother's tear-streaked face and the legal documents, and wisely retreated. Why? My father whispered. Why do you hate us this much? Because we pushed you? Because we wanted you to be successful like Ivy? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Successful like Ivy? You mean a thief? No. Dad, I do not hate you. I am just finished being your resource. I pulled a second, smaller stack of papers from the folder. You think I never helped, I said. You told the whole town I was selfish. Look at this. I slid the papers over to him. 3 years ago, when you had that hip surgery and the insurance denied the claim, who do you think paid the $20,000 balance? I asked. You got a letter saying it was covered by a charitable grant? That was me. My father looked at the receipt. It had my personal account number on it. And when the furnace died last winter, I continued, the anonymous donor who paid the HVAC company? Me. When Mom got into that fender bender and the deductible was waived? Me. I have been cleaning up your messes for years from the shadows, because I wanted you to be safe. And how did you repay me? You mocked me. You stole from me. You told me to sleep in the gutter. My father stared at the papers. His hands were shaking. He realized then that the narrative he had built, the story of the successful parents supporting the loser daughter, was the exact inverse of reality. I am done, I said, standing up. I am no longer anyone's wallet. I am no longer the backup plan. Sign the papers. I took a pen from my purse, a heavy, expensive Mont Blanc, and set it down next to the surrender agreement. You have 5 minutes, I said, or I make the call. My mother was sobbing quietly into her napkin. My father looked defeated, a man whose entire world view had collapsed in the span of an hour. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled, but he signed. He pushed the paper to Mom. She signed it, blinded by tears. Then he pushed it to Ivy. Ivy stared at the document. It was not just an agreement to hand over the inn. It was an admission that she had been living a lie. By signing, she was acknowledging that her success was stolen. Joanna, Ivy said, her voice small. She picked up the pen but didn't write. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and fearful. If I sign this, if we do this, are we still family? Do you still see me as your sister? I looked at the woman who had screamed at me, mocked me, and spent my money on her vanity. I looked for a spark of the little sister I used to carry on my back when we were kids. But all I saw was a stranger who had learned to manipulate to survive. That depends entirely on how you behave from this point forward, I said. But do not expect me to pay for your mistakes ever again. Ivy lowered her head. She signed the paper. I reached across the table and took the folder back. I checked the signatures. They were valid. The Maple Shore Inn was mine. The theft was resolved. The balance was restored. You have 30 days to vacate the main residence, I said, putting the folder back in my briefcase. I will have a property manager contact you about the inspection. Do not take anything attached to the walls. Where will we go? My mother whispered. I hear Florida is nice, I said. Or maybe Ivy can let you stay in her guest room. She owes you, after all. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I walked out of the restaurant, into the crisp Cleveland air, and for the first time in 10 years, the weight on my chest was gone. I breathed in deeply. The air smelled like ice and river water, but to me, it smelled like freedom. It was exactly 30 days later when I drove back into Maple Falls. The winter was deepening, turning the landscape into a stark, monochrome painting of white snow and black tree trunks. This time, I did not rent a sedan to blend in. I drove my Tesla, the silence of the engine cutting through the cold morning air like a knife. I pulled into the gravel lot of what used to be my parents' kingdom. A crew of workers was already there, their breath steaming in the frigid air. They were standing on ladders, wrestling with the old, rotting wooden sign that read, Maple Shore Inn. With a final groan of rusted metal, the sign came free and was lowered to the frozen ground. In its place, they hoisted a sleek modern panel made of brushed steel and backlit glass. It read, Harbor Light Lodge. I watched the transformation from the driver's seat. It was not just a name change. It was a reclaiming. I stepped out of the car, tightening my wool coat against the wind. I walked past the workers and into the lobby. The smell of cinnamon and stagnation was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh paint and industrial cleaner. I had sent a management team ahead of me 2 weeks ago to begin the transition. In the kitchen, the staff was waiting. These were women I had known since I was a child. Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, Old Man Miller, the groundskeeper. They looked terrified, clutching their aprons, expecting the axe to fall. My parents had undoubtedly told them that the ruthless corporate daughter was coming to fire everyone. "Good morning," I said, placing my briefcase on the stainless steel counter. "Morning, Miss Joanna," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice trembling. "Or, I guess it is Ms. Ortiz now." "Joanna is fine," I said. "I called you all here to give you the new contracts. Under the previous management, I understand there were issues with payroll delays and a lack of benefits." I slid the papers across the table. "Lawson Harbor Holdings operates differently," I explained. "Your tenure is being bridged, meaning you lose no seniority. We are implementing a 10% wage increase across the board, effective immediately, and full health coverage for anyone working over 30 hours a week." Mrs. Higgins looked at the paper, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. We get to stay?" "You are the only part of this place that actually works," I said. "Of course you stay." The relief in the room was palpable. I left them to sign their paperwork and walked back to the front desk. It was time for the final appointment of the day. At 10 o'clock sharp, the front door opened. My parents and Ivy walked in. They looked diminished. That was the only word for it. My father, once a man who filled every room with his booming voice and unearned confidence, looked shrunken inside his coat. My mother looked frail, her face etched with the lines of a month spent in panic. And Ivy looked like a ghost. The arrogance that had defined her existence was gone, replaced by a jittery, nervous energy. They were carrying a single cardboard box of personal effects that they had cleared out of the back office. I stood behind the reception desk, the granite cold under my fingertips. I did not come around to hug them. I stayed on my side of the line. "We cleaned out the safe," my father said, his voice raspy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. The brass keys jingled. The sound of my childhood. The sound of him locking doors I wasn't allowed to open. "Here are the keys to the main building, the maintenance shed, and the safe deposit box." He placed them on the counter. He did not push them toward me. He just let them sit there, a metal pile of surrendered power. "Thank you," I said professionally. "The walkthrough inspection has been completed by my team. We noted significant deferred maintenance on the HVAC system and the roof, but we are not seeking damages for that. We are writing it off." "Writing it off," my mother echoed, a bitter edge to her voice. "Like you are writing us off." "I am processing a business transaction," I corrected her. "You have the lease agreement for the temporary housing?" I had allowed them to rent a small, 2-bedroom condo on the other side of town that Lawson Harbor Holdings had acquired as part of a larger portfolio. It wasn't a gift. They had to pay rent, but I had set it at a fair market rate, which was more mercy than they deserved. "We signed it," my father said. "We move in today." "Good," I said. "Then I think we are done here." I picked up the keys and dropped them into my drawer. The sound was final. My mother lingered. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "Joanna," she whispered, "are you really going to do this? Are you really going to cut ties with your own flesh and blood just because of some papers? Because of money?" I looked at her, even now, standing in the wreckage of her own making. She couldn't see it. She thought this was about a loan. She thought this was about a spreadsheet. "It is not about the papers, Mom," I said, my voice steady and calm. "And it is not about the money. I have plenty of money." "Then why?" she demanded, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Why humiliate us like this?" "I cut you off because you never saw me as a person," I said. "I was a resource to you. I was an insurance policy you cashed in without asking. You looked at me and saw a credit score. You looked at me and saw a backup plan. You never once looked at me and just saw a daughter." She opened her mouth to argue, but the truth of it silenced her. She knew. Deep down, she knew. Ivy stepped forward then. She looked at the new sign through the window, then back at me. "Joanna," she said, her voice shaking. "About the clinic. I know the inn is yours now, but my lease for the spa space, it expires in 6 months. I was hoping, since the inn is under new ownership, maybe we could work out a family rate? Just until I get back on my feet?" I looked at my sister. She was still trying to play the angle. She was still trying to find the shortcut. "Lawson Harbor Holdings does not have a family rate," I said. "We have a commercial rate. If you want to renew your lease, you can submit a proposal to the property manager. It will be evaluated against market value. If you cannot afford the square footage, I suggest you downsize." Ivy flinched as if I had slapped her. "But I cannot afford market value. Not after everything." "Then that is a failure of your business model," I said. "Not my problem." My father let out a long, heavy sigh. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. He saw the tailored coat, the confidence, the absolute lack of fear in my eyes. "Is there ever going to be a time," he asked softly, "when you forgive us?" I thought about it. I thought about the little girl who used to draw pictures of skyscrapers, waiting for her parents to look at them, while they were too busy applauding Ivy's finger paintings. I thought about the Christmas dinners spent in silence. I thought about the theft. "Forgiveness implies that I am still carrying the anger," I said. "It implies that I'm waiting for an apology so I can move on." I shook my head. "I am not angry anymore. Dad, I am just indifferent. Today, I stop carrying you. Today, I stop waiting for you to be different people. So, no, I do not think forgiveness is the right word. I think the word is finished." My father nodded slowly. He understood. It was worse than anger. Anger is a connection. Indifference is a severing. "Come on," he said to my mother and Ivy. "Let us go." They turned and walked toward the door. They looked like strangers. They were just 3 people who had once known a version of me that no longer existed. I waited until the door closed behind them. I waited until I saw them get into their car and drive away, disappearing down the long, winding road that led out of the property. I picked up the ring of keys from the drawer. I walked over to the new manager, a sharp young woman I had hired from Chicago named Sarah. "Here," I said, handing her the keys. "It is all yours. Sarah, run it right." "I will, Ms. Ortiz," she said. "Are you staying?" "No," I said, buttoning my coat. "I have a company to run in Chicago. This was just loose ends." I walked out of the lodge, stepping into the biting winter air. The wind was whipping snow across the parking lot, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire in my chest that had finally settled into a warm, steady glow. I walked to my car, my boots crunching on the ice. I paused for a moment and looked down at the asphalt. I remembered the dining room. I remembered the smell of roast turkey and the sound of Ivy's voice, shrill and hateful, screaming at me. "If you cannot function like a normal adult, go live in the streets." I looked at the road stretching out before me. It was a long paved ribbon of black cutting through the white snow, connecting the property I now owned to the rest of the world. I smiled. "You told me to go to the streets, Ivy," I whispered to the winter wind. "So I did, and now I own the only road that leads you home." I got into my car, the door shutting with a solid, expensive thud. I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the Harbor Light Lodge shining in the rearview mirror, a beacon for everyone except the people who had tried to extinguish mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.